Someone is mowing their garden, but I decided I wanted to make a video. It's a nice day outside, so it will be a nice soundtrack to this video. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I have a review of The House of Silk by Anthony Horowitz. Now, if anyone saw my... They started again. There we go. They started again. It's great. If anyone saw my Christmas video, then they will know that I am cursed. Last year, I unhauled my editions of the completed short stories of Sherlock Holmes and the completed novels of Sherlock Holmes because I wasn't getting on with the writing style. And then my mum went out and bought me Moriarty for Christmas, and then my nan bought me an illustrated copy of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and I never really thought of them. I didn't consider going back to them. They've been sat on my shelves since Christmas, but you know, they were gifts. I went to Abercrombie's to collect my birthday present, and The House of Silk was that present, and I think it could be Alanis Morissette's version of irony. It could be anything. I believe that I am cursed to read Sherlock Holmes, and I just thought, you know what? Someone, somewhere, if we're believing in some sort of spiritual sign, this was a sign I should be reading this book. I like reading crime fiction. Sherlock Holmes is crime fiction, and it just so happened that I got stuck waiting in the car for a few hours, and I had this book with me. And so I sat there and I read it, and I was completely drawn in to the world that Anthony Horowitz has created within The House of Silk. The House of Silk begins after Sherlock Holmes' death, and Watson is an old man in... I think there's talk of uprising to war, and he says that he is going to detail the story of the House of Silk, a story that he has kept secret up until now. This is before Reichenbach, it's before all of that, before Holmes has met Moriarty. It's this adventure, this story. It begins with this man going to Holmes and Watson and asking them to help him with an issue he has. A scarred man is following him around, and then Holmes and Watson decide to help him. They go to investigate why this man is following this other guy. From there, everything expands. It's very much this one event, one character spirals everything. He unravels a mystery, which is exactly what you should do in a mystery novel. It should unravel as you're going through. I was really impressed with The House of Silk. It reminded me of how I felt when I watched Sherlock Holmes when I was younger. It did capture the feeling of Sherlock Holmes quite well. I was very impressed with the characters. I liked how Horowitz had really looked at the source material and used it to create this new adventure, and the mystery was great, and I forewent all of my obligations of my writing, my work, everything, so that I could read this book. It had great characters, great mystery, and once they find this man, the man with the scar on his face has been killed, and then someone Sherlock Holmes knows is found killed with a white ribbon around his wrist, a white silk ribbon, which begins this unravelling of discovering just who the House of Silk is. And I was completely surprised when I found out what the House of Silk was. I thought it was going to be some criminally masterminded thing that went all over the world, and it wasn't, and it was great, and it was dark, and I hadn't expected it to be so dark. I can understand why Horowitz wrote it the way he did, and wrote it as it was one of the dark stories that Watson couldn't tell until the time he told it. I just really enjoyed the book. I think that if you are a fan of crime fiction, then you should read this book, and maybe if you want to read Sherlock Holmes, you do well to read this book, because it's a modern take on a classic story, and Horowitz's writing style is a lot more accessible than Conan Doyle's. At least I found it to be more accessible than Arthur Conan Doyle's. It did reignite my want to read Sherlock Holmes, which made me regret giving the books away, but I still have a Reader's Digest edition. I still can go to the library and borrow the books if I so wish. I haven't yet, and I will be reading Moriarty at some point, because although this isn't Sherlock Holmes, it's still written by Anthony Horowitz. It's another mystery, and reading the House of Silk made me want to read more mysteries. I really like the way that Horowitz captured the haste and the sense of adventure and the mystery, and Sherlock Holmes felt like Sherlock Holmes, Watson felt like Watson, and it just worked. It worked for me, I'm gonna say that. And if you read the afterword in the paperback edition, you get a very good idea of why Horowitz wrote this book the way he wrote this book, and I feel that added to the experience and added to my liking this book so much. Horowitz is able to write a mystery the way a mystery is supposed to be written. Every character has some sort of secret, and just like many of the crime novels of the time, every character's hiding something. There are a lot of red herrings, and it really explores the underbelly of London society in the time, which I don't really think that Conan Doyle did, if I'm remembering correctly. So in writing this in a modern time, Horowitz was able to capture that, to explore that, which I really think added to the mystery, because the crime is really one of the more darker crimes that Holmes would have investigated. I like the climax. Actually, yes, the climax of this book was spectacular. I've taken the book off the shelf now, but this book, the climax was spectacular. It had the haste and the tension and the sense of adventure that you really want at the end of some sort of, from this sort of crime fiction. Sherlock Holmes's crime novels are very much, they do have a mystery and a crime, but there is a sense of adventure to them that is captured quite well within Horowitz's writing. And yes, it did lead to me reading more crime fiction this month, and me really putting off the Hobblong because I just wanted to read all of the crime novels that I could. So I highly recommend The House of Silk. I do think that I'll be rereading it later this year, because it's set in just around that November Christmas time, and there's talk of Christmas, and it had this undertone that it added this gothic undertone that really worked well for the darkness of the story. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do want to talk about The House of Silk, please do so, and until next time, that is all.